Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and our planet's health. And my name is Dr. Benjamin Alter. I'm your host.
My name's Dr. Susanna Alter. I'm your co-host, and we're both naturopathic doctors who support individuals in reversing disease and reclaiming optimal health through whole food plant-based nutrition and mind-body medicine.
So we have covered the macronutrients on the latest episodes of this podcast, focusing on carbohydrates a couple weeks ago, protein last week, and this week we're going to wrap up the macronutrients by telling you everything you need to know about fat. And before we dive in, to just set the stage once again, we want to remind you that on a whole food plant-based diet that's naturally nutrient dense, we don't need to focus on counting anything, whether it's calories or macronutrients or anything. We just need to focus on eating enough, eating when we're hungry, and stopping when we're full. And our health is going to improve. Our weight is going to regulate. We're going to feel great. Those are just the basic guidelines of eating on a whole food, plant-based, nutrient-dense diet. That being said, we find it helpful to dive in and better understand these individual macronutrients that can fuel the body so that we can be informed and hold conversations with people in our life and explain ourselves why we don't need to go out of our way to douse our salads with olive oil, and why eating loads of potatoes is not going to make us fat, and all these kind of things that are kind of these myths about eating plants. We can rest assured that they are just mythology. That being said, opening up the door into this big world of fat that we live in. It's a huge topic, you guys, and fat is a sexy macronutrient. It's probably, I don't know, protein's pretty sexy too. I think carbs is obviously kind of the ugly stepchild of the macronutrients. People hate carbs, they're afraid of carbs, like don't worry about carbs. But protein and fat, it's where it's at, right? Well, we know that on a whole food plant-based diet, it's a naturally carbohydrate-rich diet, naturally moderate to low in protein, and naturally moderate to low in fat. That's just the nature of plants. But a lot of people, in our experience, consulting with hundreds of people who eat a whole food plant-based diet and honing in their nutrition to support their individual healing process, a lot of people focus on the fat-rich foods, the nuts and the seeds and the avocado and the coconut and the olives and the cacao and maybe some oil. They focus on these foods because these fat-rich foods, are more calorically dense. They're more quote-unquote satiating because they are more calorically dense. And a lot of times we've got this metabolism that's a little not optimal, a little suboptimal, and that leads us to crave and feel like we need to fill ourselves with these fat-rich, calorie-dense foods that are maybe whole food plant-based, but they might be interfering with our body's optimal ability to heal.
Yeah.
What do you want to add?
Well, let's take a step back and kind of break down what we mean by fat, because in the other macronutrient episodes, we did a little bit of biochemistry. We taught you all what we mean by carb, what we mean by protein, and today we'll talk about what we mean by fat. And fat is actually a fun one to talk about because there are so many different types of fatty acids, right? You've probably heard of saturated, unsaturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. Okay, so what's all the difference between all of these different fatty acids?
Well, that's a really good place to start. And yeah, not all fat is created equal, but when we eat fat, we're going to be eating some saturated fat, some polyunsaturated fat, some monounsaturated fat, and some omega-3s, some omega-6s. it's really hard to separate all these fats when we're looking at whole plant foods. That being said, we know that some plants are rich sources of polyunsaturated fatty acids, mainly omega-3 unsaturated fatty acids and these sort of things. And we know that animal fats and animal products are the highest source of saturated fat in the diet. In addition to coconut oil and coconut products and cacao, those are really high in saturated fat. Other plant foods, not so high in saturated fat. So the main difference between saturated fat and unsaturated fat, whether it's polyunsaturated or monounsaturated, getting a little, just for a second, getting a little nuanced, sciencey in the biochemistry. It's the nature of the chemical bonds between the carbon molecules of the chains on that fatty acid. So a saturated fat means that the fatty acid chain is saturated by hydrogen atoms. An unsaturated fat means that there is a double bond between two of the carbon molecules, which leads to an unsaturation of hydrogen atoms. A polyunsaturated fat means that there are two double bonds, and therefore there's two places of unsaturated, and we're therefore missing more hydrogen atoms on the fatty acid molecule. And then omega-3 fatty acids omega is the last carbon, the terminal carbon of a fatty acid chain, and then we count back 3, and that's the place of unsaturation in an omega-3 fatty acid, and then omega-6 is the 6th carbon back. So that's more than you needed or wanted to know, but that's kind of the science and what distinguishes saturated fat versus unsaturated fat. And then, trans fat. Trans fat is where we have, oh boy, if it's hard to describe it unless you're watching, but it's where the unsaturated is kinked in a way that is
unnatural,
not naturally occurring in nature. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they made trans fat is to make things liquid at higher temperature, right?
Oh yeah, to make oils that are typically liquid to be solid.
Yeah, I flipped it in my mind.
Hydrogenated oil. See, they're adding more hydrogen into it to try to make it saturated or act like And then
it makes it more of a straight line instead of a kink.
Exactly.
And then that leads to it being more solid.
Yes.
So much more than you wanted or needed to know about the biochemistry of that distinguishes the saturated.
You did a really good job at explaining it. Cool. Definitely.
Well,
it's easier with pictures, of course.
And we only wasted 3 minutes. So
the only other thing I'll add to it is that these fatty acid chains, can either be short, medium, or long. So you've probably heard of medium chain fatty acids, short
MCT oil, yo.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's many different shapes and sizes of fatty acids. Yeah. And then when they come in together, 3 of them together, into a triglyceride. You've probably heard of that term too.
So fatty acids in your body. What are fatty acids doing in your body? The main thing that fats do in your body are they line every single cell of your body. All 10 trillion cells that make up your body have a cellular membrane. And that cellular membrane is filled with the fatty acids that you eat in your diet. You eat food, and those fatty acids go to replenish the cellular membranes of your cells. So if you're eating a lot of saturated fat, your cellular membrane is going to be filled and comprised by a lot of saturated fat. And if you're eating a lot of omega-3 saturated or omega-3 unsaturated fatty acids, then you're going to have a lot of omega-3s in your cellular membranes. And this conversation gets important. It seems like, it's just fat in my cellular membranes. But when we're talking about omega-3 versus omega-6 fatty acids, which are the 2 essential fatty acids that our body needs from food, essential meaning we can't make these fatty acids ourselves. We must rely upon our food and our nutrition to get omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. So the omega-3 fatty acids get taken out of your cellular membranes as needed and promote an anti-inflammatory pathway of your immune system in your body. Omega-6 fatty acids get plucked out of the cellular membrane and promote a pro-inflammatory pathway in your body. So the more omega-6 fatty acids that you eat in your diet and that get lodged in your cellular membranes, the more inflammation, systemic inflammation, there will potentially be in your body. And this is important because the standard American diet, so to speak, has a ratio of 25-1, that's kind of the average, omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. But really, the optimal human ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in your body is 4-1. 4 omega-6, 1 omega-3. There's always going to be more omega-6. It's more abundant in nature, omega-6 fatty acids. But we want to move ourselves in a way nutritionally that promotes an optimal ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. And luckily, when we're eating a whole food plant-based diet that is naturally higher in omega-3 fatty acids and naturally lower in omega-6 fatty acids, we're going to be taking those steps in that direction. But that brings us back to this kind of trap that a lot of people do fall into on a whole food plant-based diet. They eat a lot of nuts and seeds, a lot of these calorie-rich, calorie-dense foods. And nuts and seeds, unless they're chia and flax are kind of in a league of their own with regard to the omega-6 and omega-3 ratio. All other nuts and seeds are going to be much predominant in the omega-6 fatty acid as compared to the omega-3. So a lot of people who are eating cashew cheese and almond butter and this and that, and a handful of walnuts on their oatmeal, they're going to be moving themselves slowly but surely into unfavorable fatty acid land. And just to take a step back, there's a lot to cover, you guys. There's a lot of information here. I don't know, I think we're biting off too much than we can chew. We'll do our best. But fats also, when we're comparing them to proteins and carbohydrates biochemically, proteins and carbohydrates have 9 calories per gram of protein and carbohydrate, or 4 calories per gram of protein, 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. Fats have 9 calories per gram of fat. Did I say that right? 9 calories per gram in fats, yes. 4 calories per gram in carbohydrate and protein. So fat by nature is going to be more calorie dense, which when we're talking about storage in the body, that's a really good thing. That's why fat is how our energy is stored in our body, as primarily as fat, so that we can have a lot of energy to metabolize and to create cellular energy when we are in famine, when we are in starvation, which, let's face it, most people are not. So we don't need to go out of our way to indulge in high-fat plant-based foods and oils or anything like that. And when we do, they can cause more harm than good. And that's what we're going to get into.
Yeah. So far we've talked about how those fatty acids, they go to the cellular membranes and make up the cellular membranes. But obviously, fat goes to other parts of the body as well. Fat can be stored. Okay. Ben has an agenda.
I guess I do have an agenda. So I just want to address maybe what you've heard, like something like, your salmon, your wild caught salmon is a great source of omega-3s. It's great for your brain. It's great anti-inflammatory, this and that. So the whole idea that fat and that omega-3 fats are good for your brain, it's true. They are, but it's been a little misconstrued. Your brain does not metabolize fat. Your brain does not use fat as fuel. None of your cells really prefer to use fat as fuel. What fat does for your brain and your nervous system is it insulates your neurons, because your nervous system is so high energy. It's creating such an amount of heat as a byproduct of the metabolism that is firing those neurons. It needs a healthy insulation around these neurons, and that healthy insulation is primarily made up of DHA, which is a long chain bioavailable omega-3 fatty acid.
Yeah, so it's really the omega-3 fatty acids that support brain health, but also what they do is they decrease inflammation in the body, decrease neuroinflammation in the brain, which also promotes brain health and cognitive health.
So here's another myth, that that plant-based sources of omega-3s are ALA, which are medium chain omega-3 fatty acids, and the body really only uses EPA and DHA, which are long-chain fatty acids. That's true. That's true. Your body does only use EPA and DHA in your body. Those are kind of quote-unquote bioavailable. And when we eat fish, those are sources of primarily EPA and DHA, omega-3 fatty acids. And when we eat our chia seeds and our flax seeds, it's primarily ALA, the medium chain fatty acid. But here's the deal. Your body has this enzyme that elongates this medium chain omega-3 ALA into EPA and DHA. And that enzyme that elongates the medium chain into the long chain bioavailable fatty acid for your body is also the same enzyme that elongates the omega-6 fatty acids. So if you're eating too many omega-6 fatty acids, then you need to supplement or eat more omega-3 fatty acids. So the way around this, you guys, the little hack, if you will, quote unquote, is that we cut out, I'm not going to use that term because it's impossible to cut out, but we be very mindful of our omega-6 fatty acid intake so that that enzyme can be used and is most active in elongating our ALA from our chia seeds and our flax seeds into the EPA and DHA that really actually is used by the body. So what that means, you guys, in just practical terms, and maybe it's time to get into practical terms. A healthy, whole food, plant-based diet is naturally low in fat because you're focusing on fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, the carbohydrate-rich foods. And then the nuts and the seeds and the avocados, they're going to be moderated in your diet. And when you do that, you ensure that you don't have too many omega-6 fatty acids. So all the omega-3s that are actually in your green leafy vegetables, even your banana, and all foods have some omega-3. All of that omega-3 in the form of ALA can be elongated and bioactive in your body to support the anti-inflammatory pathways.
Yeah. Okay, so in these next 10 minutes, what I want to do is talk about the negative consequences of eating too much fat, and then go into really the practical stuff, what we recommend in terms of fat. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I guess I was on my way there, but into practical land, but to using my half a handful thing. But we'll get there at the end.
Yeah, so really, two of the biggest consequences of eating a diet that is too high in fat is that the fat can actually get stored inside of our cells and really inhibit the process of cellular metabolism. Specifically, saturated fat is more toxic to the cell. When it gets stored inside the cell, it essentially gets in the way of insulin's ability to allow glucose into the cell. So this is what can lead to dysregulation of blood sugar levels, lead to insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes. So really, it's not eating too many carbs, and we talked about this in the carb episode. It's not that eating too many carbs leads to type 2 diabetes. It's eating too much fat, and specifically saturated fat, which leads to insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
So that's one of the really big things. The other big consequence of eating a diet that's too high in fat is that this fat can also get stored in our liver cells, which will also contribute to this issue with metabolism. But what also happens when fat gets stored in the liver is that it leads to fatty liver disease. And the liver is one of our most vital, essential organs. When it gets fatty, when it gets sluggish, it leads to a lot of other issues in the body. Can lead to hormonal issues, skin issues, sleep issues, contributes to weight gain, contributes to a lot of other things. So we really want to make sure our liver stays happy and healthy. And in order to do that, we want to keep the fat intake relatively low overall.
Very well said. That was awesome, Dr. Susanna. Very concise, very clear, very to the point.
Oh,
appreciate it. So I want to address the another myth. I'm the myth buster. Susanna's keeping us on track. There's a myth that you've heard that your body can be fat adapted to run on fat or ketones, the byproduct of fat when we metabolize. Yes, it's true. It's true, you guys. Your body can utilize fat for fuel, and your body does utilize fat for fuel under a couple different circumstances. The first is when we are fasting. After we deplete all of our blood glucose, after we break down all of the glycogen that's stored in our liver and our muscle cells, then our body needs another fuel source, and fat is that fuel source for your body. Also, when we are engaging in aerobic exercise, when we are walking or getting our heart rate a little bit up, elevated, but not too elevated, but just a little bit elevated, then we preferentially metabolize fat as fuel also. But this whole myth of adapting your body to burn fat is a myth. It couldn't be further from the truth. Your body knows how to burn fat when you need to. And you don't need to go out of your way and indulge in oils or nuts and seeds and avocados or obviously any animal products, high fat, high protein foods, in order to give your body the fat that it needs to metabolize, to use as fuel when it needs to. Even the most lean person on the planet Earth has fat stored to be used to metabolize when needed. And most the standard American person probably has plenty of fat to metabolize for even months without food. That's just kind of a fact. So we don't need to go out of our way to eat fat to fuel ourselves, because carbohydrates are the preferential fuel source for every single cell in your body until there are no more carbohydrates, in which case we start to utilize the fat that's stored in our adipose tissue and throughout our body. And it's easy. Your body knows how to do it. You don't need to, quote unquote, fat adapt by drinking MCT oil or doing extensive intermittent fasting or anything like that. Your body knows how to do it. So now shifting and wrapping this conversation up in some practical terms, when we're talking about a whole food plant-based diet that's naturally nutrient dense, naturally low in fat, focused on fruits, vegetables, whole intact grains and legumes, the fat, if you will, the nuts and the seeds and the avocado, these higher fat, we call them overt fat foods because the primary macronutrient in these foods is fat and not carbohydrate. So these foods should be moderated to an extent where the total overall calories coming into your body that are from fat are somewhere between 10 and 15% if your intention is reversing disease and promoting optimal health and longevity. That's what we see when we look at the blue zones, the longest living populations around the world. Their diets are carbohydrate rich, about 70% or so of their calories are coming from carbohydrates, and about 10 to 15 10 to 15% of calories are coming from fat, 10 to 15% of calories are coming from protein. And that's what we recommend as well. And that's what happens naturally when we do focus on these foods, the fruits, vegetables, whole intact grains, and legumes, and then use the nuts and the seeds and the avocado kind of as garnish. And our favorite healthy fats, as we alluded to earlier, are flax seeds, chia seeds. And these seeds, by the way, they need to be freshly ground because the omega-3 fatty acids, the ALA that is in these seeds is locked inside the seed. It's locked in there. So you're even if you really try, your teeth really can't unlock the seeds. They got to be freshly ground in a coffee grinder, or if you've got a Vitamix, that's what I do. I put a couple tablespoons in my smoothie every morning. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. What's interesting is that even if you were to not eat nuts, seeds, avocados, coconut, etc., you would still get enough fat from your fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes because, again, all plant foods contain all macronutrients. However, there are health benefits of eating these seeds and, avocado and things like that. And so we don't suggest you leave them out of the diet, but I bring that up just to remind you all that there's plenty of fat in
a banana or a potato.
Exactly.
And actually, green leafy vegetables next to flax and chia seeds, green leafy vegetables are the next best source of omega-3 fatty acids, not by sheer quantity, but by the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s, because green leafy vegetables have essentially no omega-6 fatty acids and a little bit of omega-3s. So that ratio is the most important thing. You don't just need a sheer quantity of omega-3s. You don't need to dump flax oil or algae oil or fish oil, of course, into your body. It's all about optimizing your individual ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s, which once again, ideally is 4 to 1. 4 omega-6, 1 omega-3.
What right. else? Okay, so also another kind of real practical tip that we often provide is that really the overt fats, the nuts, seeds, avocado, coconut flakes, whatever that you're eating in the day, it shouldn't really exceed more than what you can fit in the palm of your hand.
Yeah, and my hand's a little bit bigger than Susanna's, so I get to eat a little bit more fat.
Yeah.
And unless you have disproportionately small or big hands, you get the idea. Mm-hmm. What that looks like for me, a quarter of an avocado, a couple of tablespoons of seeds, maybe some cacao nibs. That's what we like. We love cacao nibs. That's another overt fat. And for those of you who don't know, that's kind of just like raw chocolate, which, it's higher in fat. It's higher in saturated fat, but it's a whole plant food. It's also high in minerals and fiber and all the other things that we love in our plant-based diet.
Yeah, and what it looks like for me is maybe a tablespoon of flax on my oatmeal, and we make a salad dressing where we blend up seeds. So maybe there's a teaspoon of seeds in there, and then a quarter of an avocado, and then some cacao nibs at night, or maybe a chia pudding at night or something like that.
All right.
So that's kind of what it looks like. So we did it.
We did it. That was a lot. And thank you for sticking with us. Hopefully you learned a lot. If you did, feel free to like and share this video. Feel free to leave some feedback. And for those of you who are tuning in live in the plant-based and stress-free group, we appreciate you for being with us. And for those of you who are not, we invite you to come into the Facebook group called Plant-Based and Stress-Free, where we record this episode every Thursday. We also have a Medicinal Monday kind of conversational topic.
And we also host a free whole food plant-based challenge every 6 to 8 weeks in the group. So if you're wanting to really put this information to practical use in your own life, we definitely recommend you come in and join us for one of those challenges.
So that's all we got for you today. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the podcast. Peace and love, my friends.
Bye for now.